Hey, everybody. Welcome back into the Cool Grandpa podcast. I'm your host, Greg Payne, and we have got a fantastic conversation lined up for you today. We are joined by none other than George Dubec. George is an entrepreneur, an author, a proud grandfather, and an expert in networking and how to really make networking work for you. George has done everything from working as an engineer at General Motors to running one of the largest podcast streaming companies in the country. But what really stands out is how he blends old school wisdom with modern tools to stay deeply connected with his families and his network. And he is passionate about doing the same thing for each and every one of you. In fact, you're going to hear a little bit of a coaching session that goes on between me and George when he inspires me to create a grandfather assessment tool, which I have in the show notes. So be sure to check that out. In this episode, we talk about everything from spitball fights as kids to raising grandkids in today's world and how networking, yes, networking, can make us even better grandparents. George shares a great story about how he found his wife of 45 years using a love list and a little help from his friends. So, again, networking a little bit. You are going to enjoy this conversation with none other than George Dubec. And without further ado, let's get on with it. Hi, George. Welcome to the Cool Grandpa podcast. I'm excited to have you on and talk about grandfathers and networking and some of your other projects.
Okay. All right. Cool grandpa. So are you a cool grandpa?
I try to be.
All right. Well, that's good. Well, I don't know if I'm a cool grandpa or not, but I definitely am a grandpa. I got 4 grandkids and 2 great grandkids and 3 regular kids. And I wish now at this point in my life, Greg, that I had actually a couple more kids. I kind of bought into the philosophy, and it's permeated now into the younger generation where, it's very expensive to have kids. They're a pain to bring up. All the pressure on society, like you got to take them to all these classes. You got to buy them all this stuff. I mean, I grew up in a family with 5 kids, and my mom and dad, we lived in a 1,500 square foot house with 1 little bathroom. We had 7 people. I don't know how we did it. I lived in an upstairs Cape Cod house with 3 brothers. We were all sleeping in there. I can't even remember how we existed. I remember we used to have spit fights before we would go to sleep.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. We had 7 kids in my family. The biggest house we had, I think, was a split level there in Northern Virginia, and it was amazing how many times we were all just bunking with each other, and we kind of made it work.
Yeah, I mean, I think about this, Greg. I was born in small town Ohio. And my mom, I was the first one actually in our whole big family. I was like the first kid of the new generation. And my mom did not drive. Okay. She didn't have a job. My dad worked, and we would be, and I say to my, and they didn't have preschool. They didn't have all these classes where you take kids and they run around. And so I think to myself, I wish my mom was alive, but what did she do with me for 6 or 5 years till I went to kindergarten? I was with her 5 years. And she had no car, and we had no television, no internet. And I think to myself, what did my mom do with me? I mean, these kids today, you got to constantly give them something. You got to give them a TV show. You got to take them somewhere. I don't get it. Again, I wish my mom was alive. I'd love to ask her that question. What did you do with me and in the wintertime, Greg? Can you imagine being with a little kid in the winter all day? You can't go out.
Oh yeah, that would drive you crazy. But I mean, somehow we all managed, right?
Oh, well, that's the thing. I had a great childhood. I don't remember lacking anything. We got one big Christmas present every year. I remember my electric football game. You remember those?
Oh yeah.
Where the little players would be on a vibrating board.
Right.
Oh my God. I thought I was in heaven when I opened up that Tudor electric football.
Oh yeah. Well, I can remember similar type things. I think that was the rule in our house, is that essentially you could ask and you'll probably receive one big present, and then you'll get essentially stocking stuffers, right? And you might get something from grandma and grandpa, but typically that was it. It was like every kid got one quote big thing. And then, and we had a blast with it. I mean,
yep.
you just spent all day and all week and all of your winter break just playing with that one big toy and seeing everybody else's, right? Running over, what'd you get, and just having a blast with it.
Hey, here's another good one, Greg. My first bike, I had to be, I don't know, maybe 7, 8 years old, was a Roadmaster, black and white Roadmaster, 26-inch bike. I could not reach the pedals. I had to get on a step to get on the bike, and they put blocks. My grandpa was a carpenter. He put big blocks on the pedals. So when I eventually got on the bike, I could push the pedals. And to stop it, I had to come to, it's like a hill, a side of a hill, and I kind of have to fall off the bike.
Well, yeah, I remember doing that. And then also with my kids, kind of the same thing. When that bike is bigger, it's kind of a controlled crash at the end.
Right. Control crashing. These kids today, they got a mini bike and then a mid-sized bike and then another bike. I mean, it's like, and then they have electric cars. Like, it's crazy.
Well, the big thing around my neighborhood down here in Atlanta is the kids are getting all these electric bikes now too, which you can't hear them coming, but they come so much faster than a regular bike. And, the teenagers have no fear, which is part of being a teenager. But, I think as we survive those teenage years, we kind of look around and going, oh, geez, that's pretty dangerous if I'm backing my car out and I can't hear you and you're coming super fast.
Yeah, no, it's crazy stuff. But the bottom line is that I hate to say this, but we're losing family values and the younger generation is not building families. And to be honest, I don't think they even understand what marriage and a relationship is or what it's for. I think they're enamored with dating and having a hot chick. If you're a guy, get married to some hot date. And I used to say a date does not make a good mate. A good date is not a good mate necessarily. Just because you have fun with a girl, but when real life happens and you have children, all of a sudden that hot date doesn't look like a hot date anymore. They become your life partner. So just to let you know, or your viewing audience or listening audience, is that my wife and I ran the largest singles network in South Florida from 1985 to 1992. We had 10,000 single people in our database, and we used to teach them how to find a mate. And we would have parties and cruises. This is before online dating. This is before computers and the internet. So I have a lot of experience with matchmaking people and seeing couples come together and all that. So it's pretty interesting how the decades have changed the generations. And in today's world, when people ask me for relationship advice, I tell them it's every man for himself. I would hate to be single in today's world, to be honest with you. I really would. I've been married 45 years. How about you?
We're coming up on 30 this October.
You haven't done the gamut yet.
No, not yet. We still got a little ways to go.
Right.
But do you think that some of the attitude towards relationships is also a little bit our attitudes towards even consumer products, right? Everything's disposable, everything's temporary, everything's a starter home, a starter this. I've even heard starter marriage being thrown about. And I wonder how much that bleeds in to the view of relationships.
Well, it's definitely a causation. I mean, I was born in 1946. I have lived in many decades. In fact, remember the movie Happy Days?
Yes.
My high school was Happy Days. And then I entered another part of my life was Saturday Night Fever, John Travolta. That's when all hell broke loose. So I can actually see a timeline when things were like, I started at General Motors as an engineer in 1967 in small town, Ohio. And I was married. I got a girl pregnant at 19 years old. We got married. We had 2 kids. But everybody that worked at General Motors in a town of 60,000, almost everybody was married by the time they were 25, whether you got a girl pregnant or you just married them or whatever. And most people had 1 or 2 kids by the time they were 25. And in our town, we didn't have a singles. There wasn't like singles bars or nightclubs or singles anything. If you were single, you had to hope your family would introduce you to somebody that was single.
Oh, yeah. I think remembered very well kind of the people talking about how hard it was to find anybody. And I think it was like the 80s, the idea that singles bars were popping up. and that was kind of a place to go and try to meet people for dates or whatever. And before that, it seemed like it was associations for the most part, friends of friends, things along that line, so that you kind of, at least initially, had some things in common. If it was part of a network or part of an association or group or something, you had at least a little bit of a common interest to start off on.
Yeah, and also in our small town up there in the 50s, all the aunts, uncles, grandparents, nobody got divorced. In fact, divorce was not even spoken about. If you were having trouble with your husband or wife, it's like, okay, that's just part of the deal. And the big pervasive slogan from everybody was, we're together for the family. Nobody was necessarily happy or unhappy. It was like, this is it. This is life. We have kids and we're a husband and wife and we got to deal with each other, whatever that is. Now, I'm not talking about somebody that's abusive or like an adulterer, a serial adulterer or something like that. Everybody has like really nasty issues they got to deal with. But in general, everybody just was married. They stayed together. They raised their kids. And that was life, But it's not that way today. Now it's, I don't know what it is. I can't explain our culture, to be honest. I don't know what you would call it. It's kind of random, chaotic.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. And that I think it becomes so easy and almost expected just to split up, that as you start to get into difficulties, whatever it might be, financial, work stress, family stress, whatever, people tend to walk away a little bit faster than maybe they would have years ago.
Well, I experienced that. In the mid-'70s, they come up with annulments. You know that before, sometime in the early 70s and before, if you wanted a divorce, you had to go to court. You had to have a court case in front of a judge. You had to bring witnesses. And then the judge would decide whether you got a divorce or not. I mean, think about that. I mean, it was like tough. And you had to find people that would come to court on your behalf and demean the other person. So you're talking about family and friends getting involved, and it was ugly. I mean, like I said, it was so rare. And then if you did get a divorce in our town, you were like a black sheep. People would avoid you like, oh my God, Joe over there is divorced. Let's stay away from him. He must really be a bad dude. So, and then in the mid-'70s, they started to you go down to the courthouse and sign some papers. And the only thing you need a lawyer for is to split up the assets. Yeah. And that made it real simple. And now people go, well, I'm going to get married. I'll try it. I'll see if it works. Like, what do you mean you're going to try it? It's not like buying a car and doing a test run. You have kids with somebody. And that's the biggest thing. I don't understand how somebody can walk away from their family, from their kids. I can't figure that out. It's nuts.
Yeah, it's, and what's interesting along those lines is there's so many grandparents now that are raising kids. And those three top things that cause grandparents to take on that responsibility is drugs, detention, and desertion, where the adult children basically go to, their mom and dad, grandpa, grandma, and it's like, I can't take care of this kid anymore. And to your point, there's always kind of outliers to all of this that are the exception. But when it becomes so easy just to turn over that child to the grandparents to raise, it's unfortunate, and it doesn't serve anybody, because
what's even worse, and this is jaw dropping when I found this out, there's over 400,000 kids in the foster care system. That blew me away. So you're talking about kids that are sexually abused. They go from home to home. Most of them don't feel wanted or loved, and they're released at 18 years old. The law says they have to be released unless parents adopt them, which doesn't happen very often. So these kids at 18 don't have a strong background, and they're out into society. So you're talking about prostitution, drugs, crime, just having mental problems. 400,000. I mean, that should be unacceptable. I mean, our society should raise their hand and say unacceptable. And yet nobody even knows that. They don't even know the foster care system is in trouble.
Well, and to your point, it just creates another circle of all this activity again, right? It's young adults that go off through a variety of reasons, make poor decisions. Then there's kids involved at some point, and then those kids end up back into the system because nobody's broken that cycle or helped to break the cycle. And so it's just self-perpetuating,
Well, the other thing too is it's important to understand that when we were young, we were not just accountable to ourselves. When you're accountable to yourself, you're going to fail most of the time. You have to be accountable to either your school or to a coach. But in general, it was your mom and dad. But even more important was your family, because sometimes you didn't get along with your mom and dad, right?
Yep.
That doesn't, just because you have a mom and dad and you love them, but that doesn't mean you get along with them. But you might get along with your uncle, your grandpa. You don't want to let these people down. The accountability is to your family, not to, and that's so critical. And when a kid doesn't have a family, again, who's he accountable to? Nobody. So if he gets thrown in jail, if he does drugs, who cares? It's on him. And again, it's sad. But it definitely takes a community to raise a child. In fact, I remember I was lucky to have all my grandparents, because I was the oldest one born in my kind of extended family there. And I had the pleasure of having 4 grandparents. And they were from Europe. They didn't even speak English. And they weren't real smart or intelligent, but in the ways of the world, they were. They weren't academically smart or professionals, but, I mean, you could count on them. You really loved your grandparents. So.
Oh, yeah. Well, what were some of the lessons that you remember from your grandparents and maybe your grandfathers in particular?
One, and I still use it today. My grandpa, he was a carpenter. He was a ball buster. He said, Georgie, if you don't have any problems in life, he says, work hard all day, every day. Work hard physically and mentally. And man, I took him to heart, and man, I have never had a mental problem in my life. I've always worked hard. I don't rest. I don't like to smell the roses. If somebody gave me a ticket to go on a cruise for a week, I wouldn't take it. That's boring. I don't want to sit there and look at sunsets. I love to work and be productive. And that doesn't mean you have to work like some kind of physical labor. I mean, work in a productive fashion, create things, help people. And that was, to me, that was the greatest thing he ever said.
Well, and was that part of the drive too? Because you'd mentioned you'd started out as an engineer, but I know you ended up going into sales and marketing. Was that part of it, this idea of creation and moving in that direction?
Yeah, well, part of the reason I was an engineer, an executive at General Motors after 18 years, and I remember I was like 40 years old, and the guys were talking about retirement. And I'm going, I'm only 40 years old, and you guys are all talking about retirement already. It's like, no, man, I don't want to retire. So I decided I better create a different life than just working at General Motors and working up, or, developing yourself up the ladder, so to speak, and then experiencing new things. And so my wife and I, we packed up. I bought my job out. I got a buyout from General Motors, and I moved to South Florida from Warren, Ohio. And then I just became an entrepreneur and started just delving into all kinds of projects. And then I retired from my company. Now, we're the second largest radio and podcasting streaming company in the United States, called Cirrus Streaming. And my wife and partner still run the company. But I retired like 10 years ago because I didn't want to go every day to work, so to speak. I was the vice president of operations, but I retired. And I've written 6 books. In fact, I got some of my books here.
Oh, cool.
How to become an ultimate networker, and how to find a mate. Like, I teach people, Greg, how to get anything you want by networking. You can get customers, you can get employees, you can get funding, you can get a job, you can get advice, you can get resources, you can get a date, and even a mate if you use your personal network. And that's what I wrote a book on it, how to become an ultimate networker. Yeah, and I got a huge network. I got over 10,000 people. They call me an influencer, and I just love the referral networking concept.
And how did you get into this? Because it's not obvious that an engineer working for GM is going to fall into this idea of networking and building these communities and being able to leverage it for both what you want, but then also what you can provide to the other person, right?
Yeah, well, I'll never forget, before I went to college, I was the first one in my family to graduate from Youngstown State University, actually. But I said, Mom, I want to be a psychologist or a psychiatrist. And I had a cousin that was an engineer at General Motors at the time. And my mom goes, you're not going to make any money doing that. You're going to go to school and be an engineer. I go, okay, Ma. So I never liked it. But I mean, I shouldn't say that. I mean, I'm very logical. I'm rational thinking. I mean, I liked being an engineer, but I didn't love it. And I did really well. But that's when part of the transition was, I don't want to do this the rest of my life and not embrace a whole different area of what I'd love to do. So now I'm doing what I love to do because I'm financially independent. I got the kids, the grandkids, the great-grandkids, and I'm doing everything I can to be productive and help them and do some good for other people.
Now, I do want to ask you how grandpas can use marketing and what the grandkids, but I am interested because I love reading some of the Zig Ziglar books and the Tony Robbins stuff and things like that. And you spent a couple of years, I think, as the Speakers Bureau for Nightingale Conant.
Yeah, that was in the mid 2000s. I booked and scheduled all the top speakers of the day: Tony Robbins, Zig Ziglar, Dennis Commuta, Brian Tracy, all those famous, the original motivational speakers.
Right. Right. How was that, being able to go in and be around those people and see how they worked and how they communicated? Did that help sharpen your messaging and help you?
Actually, you want to know the truth?
Sure.
The truth is, it's do what I say, not what I do. I'll be honest with you. The majority
Okay.
of those guys were nothing like what they preached. A lot of them had skeletons in the closet. They weren't really good people, but on the stage, they were phenomenal and they had great messages,
Mhm.
but they didn't necessarily live their messages. That's all I can tell you.
Okay. No, that's fair.
Yeah, you know, the other thing I learned too, Greg, and this is weird. All my life, I bought into the motivational speakers, okay? But I found out that most of that stuff is inspiration, but it doesn't do anything for you. Like, for example, you can go listen to Tony Robbins for 3 days and spend $2,000. And rah, you come home and you're all fired up and wow, man, Tony Robbins, yeah. And after 3 days of being at home, you're kind of like right back to where you were. So I've become a big advocate of training. Stop going to webinars and seminars and listening to these speakers. Decide what you want to be better at, whatever skill. You want to be a better salesman? You want to be a better negotiator? Take training. Go train for that specific skill. And I mean intensive training. Get the books, take courses, go sign up for somebody that's teaching it, and learn to become skilled at whatever it is you want. But, you know, listening to these, I remember the famous phrase back in the day was, well, if you read this book or you go to this seminar, you'll get one nugget. You'll take home one nugget. I go, really? I'm going to spend $2,000 to get a nugget? And especially today, you can go online and get every one of those guys, all their cliches, all their phrases, all their things. But again, if you don't train yourself in something, like if you don't train yourself to be an ultimate networker, if you don't buy my book, go through my training, buy other books, go to some local, networking training program, and then gauge yourself. One of my big things also, not only training, but performance tracking. Decide where you are today at that skill, and then progressively over time, rate yourself every month or every couple months as how much better am I? Am I doing better? And you have to write action steps. And then you follow the action steps and make sure you're actually doing them. And I'll share a story about how that works. Okay, I thought I was a great networker all my life. I'm very outgoing. I can talk to anybody. I can go anywhere. And so I thought I was an 8 or a 9 on a scale of 1 to 10 as a networker, okay? So I wrote these books and I wrote down all these principles and things to do. Then I retook my test and I wound up being a 6. Because I go, well, what I thought I was isn't what I really am, because I'm not really doing these things like I'm saying, just kind of like I said, like these speakers. They say these things, but are they really doing them themselves? In most cases, no. So I had to amp myself up. I had to improve my own skills through writing my own book. So it's great.
I kind of love that, because I don't know why the last couple of weeks I've been going back through some of the management books and some of the things I have. And I think it was Peter Drucker that was saying, what gets measured gets
Right.
gets done, right?
That's it. Perfect.
And
yep.
Yeah. And if you're not doing it, then, and the tough thing is, and what it sounds like with your story was, when you sit down after you're going through some of your training about networking and you do that self-evaluation piece, you have that moment of truth with yourself where you can lie and say, hey, I'm doing really well. Or you can be like, well, no. And like you said, I'm a 6. Okay, we measured that. Now what's the action plan to move me to a 7?
Yeah, that I call performance tracking in every aspect of life, even being a good grandfather. People should sit down and say, what kind of a grandfather am I today? Am I doing everything I can to help my kids or grandkids or support my family? Because we just continue to do things. Okay, you're a grandpa. Great. And I'm sure you do nice things, or people do nice things. But if you don't sit down and find out a baseline, what am I doing and can I do better? Or do I want to do better? So it's kind of a self-assessment.
I love that because one of the goals that I have for this podcast is to get people to move in a direction of being a really engaged grandfather. So if right now all you're doing is signing a birthday card and putting a check in, that's good. But let's see if we can get it a little bit better. Maybe you can make a phone call once a quarter. Maybe you can start to send an email or a text message every other week. Maybe you can, let's get you moving in that direction of being engaged. To your point, with so much going on, so many of these kids and grandkids need grandfathers actively involved in their lives.
Yeah, and also what I found out, it's interesting, is kids and grandkids like the fact that you're just around. You don't have to take them to a concert or play with them. Like, in fact, one of my favorite stories, Greg, is my son's 54 years old and he lives up in Indianapolis. So I visit him as much as possible. And he told me one day, which really struck me, he goes, Dad, he says, we don't have to do anything necessarily or go anywhere. He says, I just like the fact that you're here. I'm just there, whatever. I thought that was really something to really acknowledge that. And I remember myself, I never did anything with my dad, but he was always there. My dad was there. He was like the rock, and I think people miss that. They just got to be around their kids. Just be there.
Oh,
and,
man.
Hey, listen, I got a great idea for you. I just thought of this. Since you're doing this format, maybe you could come up with a performance tracking checklist and then send it to all the people that you interview and maybe your listening audience that are grandparents, and send it to them just like a checklist of 10, 20 things that they should rate themselves as if they're doing these things that would be recommended to become a better grandparent. That would be a thing that I don't think I've ever seen anything like that. That'd be really cool.
I appreciate that. I wrote that down. So people watching this on YouTube or whatever, they're going to see me down here scribbling and stuff. But yeah, I'm making those notes because I love that idea of getting that put together to help.
In fact, if you want, if you go ahead and make that up and send it to me, and I'll kind of edit it and throw some things in there, and we could make a joint effort, and then you could have that, send it to people that, write into your show or call into your show or whatever, or sign up get on your subscription list.
Oh, that'd be awesome. I appreciate that. That's very generous. I do want to pivot over a little bit and talk about, with your expertise in networking, how can grandfathers and grandparents in general help grandchildren understand how important it is and how to make those impressions and how to build that network in person. I've working around kids these days, everything's online. These kids have tons of virtual friends, but they don't necessarily know how to communicate with adults and build alliances and build those networks. And what's some ideas and what would you suggest for a grandfather to do?
Well, some of the things that I do is, of course, I utilize social media, Instagram and Facebook, and all my kids and grandkids, every time they do something of note, I post it up and I give them kudos. Like my granddaughter just graduated from Trine University. She was a top golfer. She got straight A's. I posted all over social media. Hey, Gracie, fantastic, awesome, my granddaughter. So that's one thing a grandparent can do, is just constant, because these kids look at that and they wait for that. They want they're, if you don't do it, they're going to be like, my grandpa didn't post up my straight A report card. So they know that you're acknowledging their efforts. That's one way. The other thing that I do with my whole family, which also involves the kids and grandkids, is once a month we do a Zoom call on Sunday night at 9:00, and everybody that's available, the whole family, we get on a Zoom call, and we usually highlight one person every month. We pick either an adult or a kid, and we all focus and we all ask them questions, and we want them to update like what they're doing. So it gives these kids a platform to talk to all their adults in their family and to express what they're doing. And I think that's another great way that people can utilize, our technology. So, and then the other thing is, again, just being around. Like I just went the other day to hip hop class with my 3-year-old granddaughter. I mean, it's like watching these little kids screaming and jumping around, but she knows I went with her, and she just, I didn't have to do anything, just be there and go to watch her do these things, through these classes. I watch her play soccer on Saturday mornings and stuff like that. So, just like I said, be around as much as possible. And then of course, it's really tough to tell kids anything. If you're an adult, it's kind of like you have to wait for them to have trust in you. And then they'll probably ask you at some point for something, or to help them with something.
Well, have you had the opportunity to take any of the grandchildren to some of your keynote addresses or some of your networking meetings where they could kind of watch you interact with people and kind of see how you're modeling that?
The funny thing is, and I don't know if this is just my family, but kids don't revere what their parents do. Like when I show my kids, or like my youngest daughter, well, part of the reason, Greg, is most of my family's up north. And I live down here in South Florida, and I have my youngest daughter's 33 years old. But when she was younger in high school and a little bit older, like I would invite her to my events and come and listen to her. They don't have much interest. They don't, I don't know. They don't want to see their dad or grandpa as something other than grandpa. My kid, like I'll show my kids like I was on national television. I've been in movies, and I show them old clips, and they look at it for a minute or two and, hey, grandpa, can you take me to get ice cream? Like it's like they don't care. Yeah. I don't know what it is. I think you're too close to them. Maybe they don't really understand that you have this life outside of them. That you do these other things. Maybe I don't know. Maybe other people have a different experience, but that's what I've experienced.
Yeah, I have talked to a couple of adults about their relationships with grandfathers, and some of this was more farming community, but they had talked about going with grandpa to the coffee shop early in the morning and meeting the guys and kind of how are the adults interacting. So I've talked with some people that have done that, and then I've had other people where it was like they haven't had a chance. It's a distance thing, or kids and grandkids aren't interested. But yeah,
the big thing I think in today's world is the distance thing. We don't like when I grew up within 10-mile radius, we had probably 100 family members. And now within a 10-mile radius, I got my daughter, my granddaughter, and my son-in-law. That's it. And my wife. Mm-hmm. So that's a big change.
Absolutely. And I want to pivot over a little bit and see what you thought. What are some of the things that working grandfathers might be getting wrong when it comes to networking and trying to expand, whether it's expanding the business or just expanding their influence with people? What are some of the challenges that we often face?
Well, one of the things in today's world, because I've lived so many decades, is just dealing with people. I'm very, very, I don't know. People today, they don't have real accountability, or they don't respect things anymore. It's such a different world. In fact, even like one thing I denote, because I do a lot of events, is the RSVP. People today will RSVP or even get on Zoom calls, and they'll sign up for them and they don't show up. I mean, it's like, but they don't notify you they're not showing up, or they don't even reschedule. They just don't show up. And even people that interview me, sometimes like we'll be on a Zoom call and it's at a certain time and they're not there. And then I'll get an email maybe the next day, like something came up, and it's like, you're telling me the next day? Like, I don't know. It's just so hard. It's just really tough dealing with just people in general. I don't know how to get around it, but all I do is I work through it. I figure out how to work with people. The biggest thing is to create a database. I always recommend people, like everybody that I meet every day when I get home at night, I get as much contact information as I can from everybody, and then I put them into a database. Lawyers, landscapers, attorneys, I don't know, doctors, dentists, whoever I meet, I find out what they do. I say, can I have your contact information? Because I don't know, maybe 3 months from now, I might need to use them for some reason, or I can refer them to somebody. So I'm real big in building databases. I tell my grandkids in college, I told them over and over, get all the names and numbers of everybody you meet at college. Get your professors, contact info, get kids you meet, because when you leave, you might want to contact them after you leave and you don't have their information. So that's one of the things I'm real big on, building databases.
Now, do you have a particular format with that? Obviously, it's name, phone number, email, and there's got to be a notes section about like.
This is here's what I do. I carry a box with me to networking events, and I don't use all the digital V cards and virtual cards and the QR codes. To me, I don't like that. When I have somebody that I meet of note, I pull out a clipboard, I make them sign their name, phone number, or I sign it, their email address, and then I put notes like, look, I'm going to call you next week, and I make a note. So now it does two things. When I get home, I have the most important people that I'm going to put in my database, and then I have notes, and then they saw me actually take notes about them, so they know that I'm serious. Now, when you just exchange business cards, how do you know that's ever going to come to fruition of anything? I give you my business card, you give me yours. and I never hear from you again. Or I'll lose your business card, you'll lose mine, but I never lose my clipboard. So I'm old-fashioned or old school, if you want to call it in that way, but it works.
Well, what I like about that is number one, if you're dealing with younger people, that really stands out. To your point, I'm also at work sometimes running into organizations where they don't do business cards anymore. But if you have that clipboard or you have something where people are signing their names, putting their information down, that's going to make you more memorable or sticky. Right. And then when you actually follow up after you said, I'm going to shoot you an email within the next 3 or 4 days, boom, it pops up. And it might just be like, hey, great to meet you at Rotary. This was fantastic. I'd love to follow up and maybe grab lunch in a couple of weeks. Again, I think that's, a lesson that's of how do you make yourself memorable? How do you make yourself sticky? How do you start to make yourself move to the top of their consciousness list?
Well, then the other thing I always do is not only do they write their contact information on a clipboard, but I always take a selfie with them, me and them. And when I get home at night, I text it to them and I say, great to meet you, with a smiley face and a thumbs up. So now they saw me write their information down. They get home, they see my picture, they remember who I am, and I acknowledge that it was great to meet them. And then any other notes I want to, put in there, like I'll call you next week or whatever. And it really, again, like you said, you got to get to the top of the mind, because they might have met 10 people that day. But another tip is, if you're single, that's a great way to work the singles market. When you meet a gal, when you meet her, get her information and take a photo with her and then send it to her.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That works in the singles world too.
Well, and then it'll help jog, let's say it's her, right? It'll help jog her memory, especially if she meets a couple of people, whatever the situation is, and they're trying to figure out, like, who was Greg again? Was he the dark-haired guy with the, dimple or whatever? And it's Greg with the glasses and the beard. Okay, got it.
Well, I got one other final story about using your network. Okay, this was 1978, back in the disco days. I had a 3-piece white shirt, chains, white suit, smoking a band of Firebird. I had lots of dates, but at that time, again, using my engineering, rational, logical mind, I said, well, how am I going to find the girl that I would really like to marry? So I wrote down what I call the love list. I wrote everything on a piece of paper: physical characteristics, personality traits, deal makers, deal breakers, background, experience. I made a list. And then we had to use a copy machine. But I used a copy machine, and I gave it to my 10 best male friends who were all single, meeting lots of women. So I said, look, if you run into a girl like this, I want you to connect me. So 3 months later, my best friend Paul calls me up. He says, George, I met a girl at a party last night. You got to meet this gal. So he introduced us, and we've been married 45 years, and we have a beautiful daughter and a granddaughter. And I used my referral network to find my mate. So there you go.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that.
Yeah. That was pretty cool. So again, I just stressed everybody, by the way, if anybody wants my information, I have a website called theultimatenetworker.com. It's THE Ultimate Networker, all one word.com. If you want to get on my email list or learn about my books and information like that, it's all available on my website.
Yeah, and we'll be sure to put those into the show notes as well. So if folks are out driving around and they're hearing this, we'll make sure we've got that. And then we'll also put it in too with, when we publicize the podcast episode. George, is there anything about networking? Is there anything about being a grandfather that we haven't brought up that you'd like to talk about?
No, I think the key element is just to make sure that you acknowledge all of your grandkids. You spend time with them, even making a phone call, sending them a note, whatever, and just keep them in your life. Keep them. Don't let them fade away. Don't let them drift off on their own. Keep in touch with them, whether they acknowledge you or not. But the fact that you're calling them or contacting them is really great. And then the other thing, too, is in today's world, a lot of people are struggling financially. And if you're a grandparent of means, like I send money to some of my family members that are struggling and help them financially too. That's another ingredient. Instead of taking a cruise, take some of your money and maybe help one of your grandkids go to college or be more productive with your money. That's another way to help out.
Oh, I love that. I mean, it just helps build that legacy and also models that giving and that servant leadership behavior. So I love that. George, this has been a great conversation. I've wrote down about the performance tracking list, so I'm going to start working on that and shoot it over to you. But thank you so much for being on the Cool Grandpa podcast. I really have enjoyed this conversation.
Okay, well, I enjoyed it too, and I guess you're a cool grandpa, and I am too. So welcome to the Cool Grandpa Club.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Take care.
All right, bye-bye.